Hello, and welcome to my first podcast episode. If you know me, you know I've been saying that I'm going to do this podcast forever, and I've always had a million reasons why I didn't get to it. Oh, I was too busy, or oh, I just don't feel it doesn't feel like the right time, or I don't know, da 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 da, and all these different reasons, and I'll say excuses as to why I wasn't ready and willing to show up. And that is over. I am now fully stepping into who I am, who I came here to serve, and understanding the why behind my presence and my practice. And so, with that said, thank you so much for being here, for showing up and listening to what I have to say. Because, as you know, if you've been following me for a while, that there's quite a few things that once you get me started on, I cannot stop talking. And I want this to be a podcast that serves, that really nourishes you, but also to let this be a bridge between who I am and to the people who I feel called to serve, so that you have something that you can get to know me by and understand my medicine and my practice and my understanding and spirituality, but also take what I've learned and apply it for yourself. Wrestle with your own ego and figure out what do you actually believe and what have you been told to believe. And so if you're engaging with this from the beginning, I already know that you are a hungry individual looking for spiritual truth, that you want to get to the heart of an issue and you want to understand not just what's going on, but why and who you are. And so, yeah, just take a moment and appreciate that there aren't that many people who are so hungry for this level of truth and insight and understanding. And there's so many people who just want surface level truth, surface level understanding, but that's not you. You are here to go deeper. You feel this calling and to say, okay, what is the truth? Who am I? And how do I show up in this world today? And that takes guts, that takes courage. And so kudos to you. Thank you for being a part of my community. And let's get started into my very first official podcast episode. So the episode today, I want this to be groundwork. This is essentially me laying the foundation for everything that is to come. So to know me, to know my medicine, to know what it is that I'm going towards, what I'm moving towards, you have to understand where I've come from. And so right off the bat, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. We're talking like so growing up, I had my dad, who was a single father, and my brother, and both of them struggled with chronic depression and self-harm. And growing up, I intuitively went into the caretaker role. I was and I was so good at sensing people's needs before they even knew it themselves. I was an expert at telling, just by how my dad drove in the driveway, I could tell what's the energy today, how do I need to show up. And in that experience, I like I had so much love and care to give that I just intuitively felt like, okay, this is who I am. I'm the caretaker. I'm the healer. And I didn't have the words yet to describe it at the time, but I just naturally went into that space. And in that space, I had such a strong connection to God, universe, source, whatever you call it, I was connected to. And I would come home after school and just out of so much love and desire and care to be of service, I would wash the dishes, I would cook dinner, I would clean the house. And to me, it felt so good, which is hard. It's weird to think about. Like, meanwhile, my house is a mess. My brother and my dad are both in these very deep depression pits. And I felt good. I felt like, wow, I love to give. I'm being of service. This is who I am. I am called to be of service and love others. And my connection to God, source, the universe was my lifeline. I was so full of that joy and love and peace that that has been who I know I am. And I know what it feels like to be in that level of connection to the divine. But then as you get older, life gets more complicated. Life gets more and more challenging. And so growing up, I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist. And if you're Adventist, if you're listening to this, you already know what that's like. But if you have never heard of Seventh-day Adventist before, how I like to describe it is take Jehovah's Witness, Southern Baptist, and a dash of Mormonism, and you get Seventh-day Adventist. Oh, and like some Judaism as well. And you take all of those, and if you cook them up together, you would get Seventh-day Adventist. Adventists believe they are the remnant church, the last of God's chosen people. They are by the book. Everything has to be biblically based. And you are, in a way, prepared to defend your faith from everything. Everything has to go back to the Bible. And Adventists as well, there's a lot of end times preparation. You believe that we're living in the last days, and that as God's chosen church or God's remnant church, that it is your responsibility, I'd say, to help guide other people to Christ before it's too late. And so growing up, that was the spiritual framework that I was given, Seventh-day Adventist. We go to church on Saturday, Sabbath, from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. We don't eat pork. Everything is brought back to the Bible, and that's it. End of discussion. And with that being my spiritual framework, with that being the understanding of like, okay, cool, I know what it's like to be in connection to God. I know what it's like to have a relationship with the divine and what that feels like. And then having this framework, I was like, okay, cool. This is it. This is the truth. Like, let's double down on it. And as I was navigating life and growing up, I had this hunger for spiritual truth, for insight, for a deeper understanding of not just what's going on in my experience, but the world. And how can I take this truth, this love, this wisdom that I'm cultivating and searching more of, and be of service with it. And I remember there was times where I would be, really depressed and struggling, and there'd be dysfunction in my family, and I would be praying for wisdom. Like, God, give me the wisdom that I need to not just navigate the situation, but become the person who I want to become. And at 13 years old, I would walk to the church by myself. It was about a 20-ish minute walk, and rain or shine. And I would go to the Revelation seminars. These are meant for like adults. Like, these are next level. Like, every Adventist seminar is pretty intense. Like, this isn't surface level stuff. You are going into the meat and potatoes of Revelation, and like, not just Revelation, but Daniel, and like going deep into scripture. And so at 13 years old, I was so hungry for this truth that I would go there by myself. I was a member of Pathfinders, which is like the Adventist church's version of Scouts, and I would show up for that. I was class pastor and was showing up for that. I would come home from school and I would watch tons of YouTube videos about like Ellen White and the Bible and prophecy and this, that, and the other, because I was so committed to understanding what was going on. And that level of truth, that hunger for truth, is something that has always been a guiding principle in my life. But the challenge that I had was around this time, I was also starting to recognize my sexuality. And that was probably not my first crisis, I'd say, but it was probably one of the foundational experiences that have led me to becoming the person I am today. Because so as growing up Adventist and starting to recognize, like, oh my goodness, like, I'm attracted to the same sex. Well, this is what the Bible says. What do I do? And so I started really hating this part of myself. The first time I came out to a pastor who was affirming and LGBT, like, he was a safe person to come out to. But my very first words were, I'm gay and I hate it. And I had so much fear and shame and anger towards this part of myself, my sexuality. And I was less mad at that But I would go to God and I would say, cool, you know what? Like the Bible says this, I trust you. You know what? This is going to work out. You're going to change me. Like I'm dedicated to truth. I'm dedicated to love. Like y- I don't feel called to a life of celibacy. I want a family. We know this. And I trust God that you're going to make it happen. And what was interesting though, is it was during this time in my life, I couldn't feel God's presence. I knew what it was like to be in connection to God at a young age. I knew what it was like to be surrounded by his presence. And in this experience, no matter what I did, no matter how much I repressed this part of myself or challenged this part of myself or prayed that God would fix this part of myself, I couldn't feel God's presence. And I was getting really angry with God. And I reached a point where I was so mad at God. I remember praying and telling him, God, if I don't feel your presence again, if you don't show up and start, doing what you say you're going to do, then I'm going to be an atheist. So now after like 2 weeks, I had already had multiple spiritual experiences that like completely blew my mind. I've had experiences where I know there's a spirit world, and me trying to convince myself I was an atheist was not happening. And so, but it was during that space where I was like, okay, God, like I'm mad at you. We're taking a break, where I started accepting who I was. I started to say, okay, cool, yeah, I'm gay. All right, you gotta figure this out. So I started exploring affirming theology and more about just an LGBT affirming Christian perspective. What was interesting was I started to feel God's presence again. And this put me in a little bit of a crisis because I was like, huh? The Bible so clearly says this. But then I'm also learning at this whole other new perspective. And I know what it feels like to be in connection to God and the universe and source. And I'm feeling that again. I'm feeling that relationship growing. I'm feeling that inner fire within me starting to open up and like, feel alive again. And so I started leaning into that. And it was in this space where I was like, now at this time, I am end of high school, starting university. And this is where I start my healing journey. This is where I really start wrestling with myself and say, okay, God, like, we need to figure this out in a way that actually feels right. That doesn't feel like I'm betraying myself or shrinking myself or betraying the truth that I know deep in my bones to be true. And so I started getting therapy, and that was life changing. It was around this time in my undergrad where I switched from doing business school to studying psychology. Well, no, it was actually business school, then it was religious studies, and then it was psychology. And I always knew that how I would be of service would be this intersection between psychology, spirituality, and business. And that's what I'm building today. But I always knew that that's where my calling would be. And in this space of, okay, starting to get therapy and start doing the deep healing work, the more I'm actually able to feel God's presence again. And I started really wrestling with, okay, like, what's the truth here? Can I even still call myself an Adventist? Can I even still call myself a Christian? Because what I believed is that to be in a relationship to Christ, you have to be in relationship to the concept of truth. Even when your ego says, nope, this is the truth, that's it. To be in a relationship with truth, to be in a relationship with Christ also means saying, okay, my ego aside, what do I need to see? And truth isn't afraid of more information. Truth isn't afraid of being challenged. Truth isn't afraid to be explored from every single angle. And being an Adventist, when I had these questions, people would shut these questions down or say, no, if you go down that path, you're going to lose your faith. And I'm like, well, no. Truth isn't afraid. So why am I not allowed to ask these questions? So I started asking more and more questions, and I would get bullshit answers. Like the answers were not satisfying at all. And I had to start saying, okay, cool. I'm in connection to God, universe, source. I'm in connection to what I know it feels like to have a deep and intimate relationship with the divine. And what I'm experiencing here feels like I'm putting the divine in a box. I'm trying to fit the divine into my current perspective, and that's not going to work for me. And so it took me a while. It took me a lot of wrestling with myself, many sleepless nights, struggling with insomnia, having conversations with people, and eventually I reached the point where I no longer could call myself an Adventist. And that was hard. That felt like an identity shift where I was scared because my community was Adventist. I had so many close friends who were Adventist. I would work at an Adventist summer camp. Like Adventism was such a huge part of my life. I went to an Adventist school, like I both elementary school and high school were Adventist. And so to say that I'm no longer Adventist felt like I was stepping out of my community and out of my sense of belonging. And that was scary. What was more scary was as I kept following these principles, as I kept following, all right, God, show me the truth. What's going on here? And more layers were getting peeled back. This belief that I once held so dearly, God would be like, nope, that's too limiting, or that's not the full perspective. Let it go. And eventually I reached a point where I couldn't even call myself a Christian anymore. And that was a big shift. For an entire weekend, I think I was having like a pretty intense existential crisis. Um, and nobody was really able to support me navigating that. Like I talked to my dad, who had thankfully had done so much healing work and inner work that we were able to have really good conversations again. But he wasn't able to meet me where I was at. My therapist didn't have the same level of spiritual understanding or insight to meet me where I was at. And so I just felt completely alone and confused and frustrated in this experience because I had been so committed to God, to church, to Christianity. And for all that to be stripped away felt completely overwhelming and exhausting. But I still kept showing up. There was a time where like sometimes showing up was me just not engaging with church or Christian community and saying, okay, cool, I'm going to show up this way. I'm going to show up just by honoring where I'm at and not pressuring myself to have things figured out and to allow myself to be in the mystery and the confusion of it all, trusting that every step of the way was a part of the process. And so from that perspective, I started exploring to more and more different spiritual perspectives. I would explore Buddhism and Taoism. I would explore, more of the mystic arts and occultism. I would explore, pretty much anything. Honestly, like my entire YouTube history was spirituality and history and all these concepts, and I couldn't get enough of it. And what that experience was showing me was like, okay, cool. God doesn't fit inside a box. And there's all these different lenses. So what do you want to do? And there was a part of me that felt pressured into having to choose another lens. Oh, am I this? Am I that? Do I accept this? Do I accept that? And what that experience kind of showed me was you don't need your spirituality to fit inside a box. You don't need your spirituality to be in this neatly tied package where you can say, yep, I'm this. Your spirituality is between you and your connection to the divine on your terms. Okay. All the other tools, resources, all these different perspectives and understandings can be taken and said, okay, how do I feel inspired, or how do I feel this practice or this perspective is going to lead me closer to who I am and to who I know what is truth, to who I know what will bring me closer to God, to the universe, to source. And from this experience and still showing up in therapy and doing my inner work and doing a lot of my own trauma healing, I kept feeling this pull to go deeper, to keep showing up, to really understand who am I, what am I here to do, and to feel that experience of what it's like to be really in connection to the divine without feeling it's limited or put into this box or anything that feels restricting. Because I believe that the truth sets you free. The truth doesn't square you up and put you into this little box that needs to be contained and neatly packaged. The truth sets you free. And if I feel trapped by a perspective, I'm willing to let it go. And so how I like to think of it is that all these perspectives, all these religions, all these way of thinking, they're like pools. Cool. The pool is great to teach you how to swim. The pool is good so you can get comfortable being in the water, so you can eventually go into the ocean. but you have to be willing to commit yourself to the process of learning how to swim. And so if you're comfortable swimming in the kiddie pool, but then you never go into the deep end of the pool, then just be honest with that and just say, cool, I'm comfortable here. And that's fine. There's no judgment. There's no shame in that. But for me, I was like, okay, cool. I'm in the kiddie pool. All right. Now I want to learn to swim in the deep end. Okay. Now the deep end doesn't feel satisfying anymore. I'm ready to swim in the lake. And I swim in the lake. And then I'm like, okay, cool. This lake feels good. Now I'm ready to swim in the ocean. And what it is that analogy of learning to swim is really just you learning to be in connection to the divine without letting the world or other people's perceptions or understandings get in the way of what you know to be true. Okay. And so for me, I started to explore these different practices, and I started to think to myself, okay, cool. This helps me go deeper. This gives me a dose of medicine in the sense that it shows me like this is the part of myself that's been wounded. There's this core wound here. And this perspective changes it so that I'm able to receive the dose of medicine that I need to step forward in becoming who I really am. And I believe that at the core of our beings, we are made in the image of God. We're an extension of source, that the universe reflects our inner world is reflected back out to us. And at the core of my being, I'm made in the image of God, universe, source. And the deeper I look within myself, the deeper I find him. The deeper I go within who I am, who I came here to be, and what my truth, my impact, my medicine, what it is that I came here to fully step into, the more I step into my most honest, authentic, empowered version of myself, the more I am a powerful reflection of the nature of God, universe, source. And so that's been my calling, is to go deeper into this, to go deeper into my understanding, to go deeper into what is truth, what is love, what is wisdom, and how can I embody these principles in a way that actually serves people, that actually collectively brings us forward. And in that experience, so I started exploring all these different things. And my first time getting a tarot reading, for example, I was terrified. Part of me was like, oh, I was told this is a portal to demons, and if I do this, then I'm just giving the demons permission to run wild in my life, and I could become possessed. Like that's the level of thinking that I was brought up in. But then the other part of me, my intuition, my connection to God, universe, source, was saying, nope, there's something here for you. Listen. And I was scared. And so I remember literally the first time I had a tarot reading, it was with this druid, and shout out, really cool guy. Absolutely love him. But I prayed first. I was like, Jesus, if this is dumb, if I'm welcoming demons, if I'm, doing something that I shouldn't be doing, please stop it, because I'm going to do it. And so I prayed, and I was like, all right, God, Jesus, like, you got my back. I'm going to do a tarot reading. And if I accidentally open a portal to demons, oopsies, you got my back though, right? Anyway, I had the tarot reading, and it blew my mind. Like, everything he said was potent medicine. Everything he said was speaking to different parts of my soul and said, this is who you are. This is who you're becoming. This is what you need in order to step forward and becoming who you truly are. And I was shook, because I was like, that wasn't inviting a demon. I feel very empowered and supported and comforted. And I feel like I've been seen at a deeper level. And this is medicine. And the Bible says that you will know me by the fruits of our labor, of our love. And this is medicine. This is helpful. This actually makes me feel like I'm coming closer to God. I'm coming closer to source. And so I started being more curious, and I started exploring more things. I got a palm reading done. That also blew my mind. I was like, shoot, how do you know that? That clearly it's written on my palms, but that blew my mind. And then the more I started exploring these different practices and perspectives, the more I started kind of seeing all the threads beneath them and realizing that, like I said before, God, universe, source doesn't fit inside a box, and he'll show you one aspect of himself or themselves and then completely show you another. And if, biblically speaking, if we believe that God is Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, right? God does not fit inside a box. The universe does not fit inside a box. The source of creation itself does not fit into a limited understanding of reality. Sit with take a moment and ask yourself, where are you putting the divine inside a box so that it fits your current perspective? Ask yourself, are you willing to let that perspective go in order for higher and greater truth? Are you willing to let this past version of you, the version of you that shrinks, that takes all the information and tries to fit it inside a current narrative, rather than taking a step back and saying, okay, show me what's here as it is so that I can take it and become who I truly am? And that involves entering or engaging with the mystery. That involves being willing to be uncomfortable. That involves letting your ego be challenged and continuing to move forward anyway. Recently I've been becoming an expert at getting my ego butt kicked. I have quite a few mentors in my life who will mirror back to me with my egos getting in the way, and I welcome it. I give myself permission to be all hurt for a second. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, my ego's upset. Fine, cool. Say what you need to say, let it out, and come back to truth. And the more I engage in this process, the more I realize my own gifts sharpen, my own tarot readings. So since that experience a few years ago of my perspective shifts and my spiritual transition, I have since become an expert at helping other people navigate these spiritual transitions. And I've shifted from, studying these things to practicing and embodying them with the experience now was I have spiritual experiences quite regularly that sharpen me, that call me out, and that show me where my ego is getting in the way of myself. And it's this continuous process of saying, okay, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm willing to engage in my transformation. Thank you for supporting me. And when we meet the universe with that energy, the universe loves it. The universe is willing to support us, and that God, universe, source, whatever language you use, because to me, they're all different ways of saying the same thing. When we approach the universe with that energy, the universe is willing to back us up completely. Once again, biblically speaking, the Bible says the kingdom of heaven is within. So why are you looking outward instead of inward? That involves doing your inner work. Alchemy, so as an alchemist myself, alchemy is the process of taking your lead, of taking your trauma, your doubt, your fear, your wounds, your core wounds, and transforming them into gold. That's love, truth, wisdom, insight. It's the core of your being. And for me as an alchemist, my perspective is that God, universe, source is so much bigger than I can imagine. So I'm willing to embrace the mystery and engage with the transformation and show up for myself. And alchemy is called the great work for a reason, because if we take our inner work seriously, so there's a phrase that says, the deeper you meet yourself, the deeper you can meet others. And just imagine how different the world would be in every single aspect if we actually took the time to get to know ourselves at a deeper level. Not just surface level nonsense. I'm talking about who are you at the core of your being. Okay. And that takes courage, that takes strength, that takes determination. And if you are willing to accept that invitation to go inward and get to know yourself at this level of continuous refinement and transformation of the self, your life just unfolds in incredibly beautiful and magical ways. And I've seen it happen for myself. I've seen, my experience transform. I've seen how the universe has maneuvered things so that I would get the transformation or the dose of medicine or the insight or the perspective or the wisdom that I need to continually stepping into this version of myself. And it's not coming from a place of shame and that there's something wrong with the version that we are now. There's not. There's nothing wrong with us as we are now. But so many people engage with their transformation through this energy of shame and fear and that I need to be better than what I am now. Whereas the universe doesn't engage like that. The universe says your transformation can happen naturally, playfully, and through love, through appreciation, through you just showing up and appreciating who you are now and peeling back the layers of who you're not. That's how your transformation unfolds in a way that is so beautiful, that's so rich, that's so satisfying. And that's the types of transformation that I'm engaging with myself, but also helping other people engage with. So many people engage with therapy or coaching or healing work because they're trying to fix themselves. And I'm here to say that you don't need to fix yourself. You need to get to know yourself. You can't fix somebody if you haven't even met them, right? And so why are you trying so hard to fix, to transform, to be other than what you are now, when you're not actually willing to sit with yourself and say, cool, this is who I am. I am willing to accept and maybe even appreciate the human experience I am having right now. So with that being said, I'm going to start kind of wrapping things up, is that my journey went from being deeply Adventist, being deeply Christian, to feeling like this was the truth and everything else had to fit inside this narrative, to essentially having multiple tower moments from tarot. If you understand the tower, it's when your foundational beliefs get shaken up. And so having these tower moments where God, universe, source was saying, cool, you need to take a step back. You're putting me in a box again. You think you have it figured out? No, you don't. I'm going to show you something totally new that will blow your mind. And by continually showing up with the presence beneath the practice, I came to where I am today, which is now I am a psycho-spiritual coach and alchemist. I help people who are navigating profound spiritual transitions, helping them navigate your spirituality, helping people navigate spirituality in a way that's trauma-informed and grounded in psychological principles, but also spiritual truth that doesn't put you in a box. That doesn't say this is the one truth that needs to be prescribed everywhere, because multiple truths coexist and they all point back to source. They all point back to God. And if you are willing to engage with your transformation, if you are willing to show up and ask yourself, who are you really? Who do you want to become? And how do you want to engage with your human experience? Then you are the type of people that I want to be in connection with. If you are the type of person who loves having spiritual conversations, who loves to, be with a group of friends and have those deep talks and really just feel seen and satisfied and completely supported by not just your community, but by the universe, you're my person. And so as I wrap this up, I just want to end with one final note that says, no matter how much you try to change or fix or transform your life, if you're not doing it from a place of love, joy, acceptance, and appreciation, you will always keep coming back to a version of you that's rooted in hate and fear and shame. And that's not who you really are. You are made in the image of the divine. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. As cheesy as that sounds, it's true. And if there is a part of yourself that you hate, if there's a part of you that you fear, if there's a part of you that you shame so deeply and you want this part of you to be gone or get fixed or to change, ask yourself, can I just sit with it for a moment? Can I just accept that this part is here and it's wanting my attention? And the same way for me, my sexuality was such a huge thing that I had to wrestle with. Now, I'm so grateful that I've had these experiences where I got to take this really deep lead, this part of myself that I really hated and wanted to get rid of. And now it's just such a foundational part of who I am, that I'm so grateful that this experience is a part of my life. And allow yourself to open up to the mystery. Let go of needing to have it all figured out. Open up to getting to understand who you truly are, what you know to be true, and are you willing to go all in on your own transformation? Thank you for listening to my first episode. More episodes are going to come. They're going to be in this style where I'm just going to talk and share and say whatever comes up naturally. And this isn't the place for polished perfectionism. This is the place for raw truth, authenticity, and empowerment. And if that's something you're interested in, give me a follow, pay attention to my journey, reach out if you have any questions, and engage. Engage with yourself, engage with the universe, and if you feel inspired, engage with me. With that being said, have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you for taking the time to be a part of my community, and I love you. Take care.